Can you please state your name and date of birth?
My name is Daniel Samakow, and my date of birth is August 21st, 1952.
I'm James Evans. I was born March 15th, 1958. I first came to Venice. I was a freshman at UCLA, and I was taking an anthropology course. And it was 1976. And I sat down, and the guy in the seat next to me said, "You look really happy." And I said, "Oh, I just got a raise at my job at the library. I now make $5.25 an hour." And he laughed and he said, "Oh, I work at this funny little restaurant and I make $100 a night as a busboy." And obviously in the mid-70s, that was a lot of dough. And so he said, "In fact, I know one of the guys isn't going to show up tonight. And if you have white shirt and black pants, they would hire you." And I said, "I've never even been in a nice restaurant. Like, I could never work there." And he goes, "Be there at 4 o'clock. So he gives me the address, which is across the street from the paddle tennis courts on the boardwalk in Venice. And it's a little white building, and I see a really handsome African-American, very dressed up person in the alley behind the restaurant. And my new friend introduces me to Hal Frederick, who was one of the owners of this little restaurant called Robert's. And right then my friend Charles says, "Oh, you know, Wayne isn't coming to work tonight. I thought maybe my friend could work." And he said, "Oh God, just what we need, another one." And I said, "Redhead?" And he said, "Come on in." And hence my almost 50-year career in restaurants began. But that first night, I saw something that I never saw even as I got older. I think Venice attracted a kind of free-for-all, eclectic clientele, especially at that time, that was a mix of celebrities, really cool people, and locals. And I just immediately became hooked and have, as I say, spent almost half a century in that business thanks to that.
And a good friendship with Hal also.
And very close. Yeah, yes. Very close.
My first early experience was when I went to Cal Arts and was majoring in happenings and environments. And we would come down to the nude beach on Venice Beach. That was right near where Danny's, our restaurant, was, right where Windward is. And it was a 100% nude beach. It wasn't just topless, it was bottomless. And we would come down there and, you know, hang out at the beach and hang out. Yeah, that was and which I loved. It was so free. I mean, and that's, I think, attracted me to Venice. It was such a free place, and I kind of, how cool is this? So what impressed me, connected me to Venice at the time, it was really this sense of freedom. Again, I was going to an art school, you know, studying with Alan Capro, who coined the phrase happenings, and just was a very free-thinking kind of person. And here was a bunch of kindred spirits. And I had moved from Pittsburgh, and I needed to reset my mind to be, you know, California. And this place did that for me. People in the service industry could move here because it was so cheap to live down in Venice. And it had this natural freedom and artsiness, and you know, when I first moved here, they said the negative ions by the beach made you happy, relaxed you, and I always thought Venice was a confluence of those negative ions and sort of the high intensity of Hollywood, where everybody was trying to get ahead, and that sort of smashed together and created this sort of amazing confluence of energy. But we met in
1982 on March 15th, as it turns out. On my 24th birthday, my friends took me to the West Beach, a friend in particular, and she knew everybody in the restaurant. And so I ended up going to the bar and sitting by myself, waiting for her to return so we could celebrate. And in walks Daniel, who lived next door in the little fennel-strewn cottage. And he was, at that time, had just finished a painting. And he sat next to me, and we started talking, and before I knew it, he said, "Do you want to come see the painting I did? It's right next door." And we just had our 40th anniversary as partners and friends and business partners. And
You name it.
yeah. And it was, I think, the last summer before AIDS really took over, and most people understand the service industry was really devastated by those first 10 years of AIDS. So I think part of it too was being in Venice, we saw a lot of very creative people who succumbed almost immediately, and it brought a bond to us. We still to this day say, when you've been through that experience of losing people you dearly love, and kind of, I was always sure I was the next one. Like, how did I get spared? And I think that forged a bond that we never would break, and so far we haven't.
Well, also we became this, because we were this relationship, and I liked to cook, which ended up getting us and he was the friend of the house. So yeah, we would do barbecues in that little fennel front yard, and people would be going to the West Beach where Bruce Martyr was cooking Nouvelle cuisine. And they would be of course they were all doing coke, but they come out and having eaten a quail egg and a piece of something, and they'd be smelling like steaks or whatever we were cooking. Like, oh my God, we want your food. And it's like, we should go into the restaurant business at some point.
I mean, for me, the thing I remember about Venice in, say, the late 70s and early 80s was that when you talk to anybody else in LA, it was like the Wild West. It had a real high crime reputation. It was, why would anybody, if Santa Monica were available or the Marina, why would you want to be there? Which was precisely the reason I loved it, because you didn't have those kind of people there. I just remembered the affordability and the openness of it, and the fact that besides the drugs, I felt like there were so many people there looking for alternative existences, and I really connected with that. And having grown up on military bases, I was so seeking people who wanted to settle down and be in a place and discover who they were. So the reality for me was just the opportunities of being around people who were thinking differently was really what Venice meant to me. And it was a neighborhood. I mean, when you first come to LA, especially as a teenager going to college, the sprawl of LA is almost daunting. And I remember finding Silver Lake, which felt very community oriented, and I thought, I could happily live here. Or Venice. I didn't see any other places in this area that so embodied neighbors and community and routine of seeing each other.
And so, early 80s, now you were talking about you're starting to get into the restaurant industry. So let's talk a little bit about that growth. And you were starting to talk about 72 Market Street, if you want to talk about that as well.
It opened in August of 1984. I just don't think there had been anything like that. It was, I think, in the Doug Christmas space that was kind of a gallery in the 70s. And Tony Bill had still has exquisite taste, and had Morphosis, a kind of cutting edge architecture firm, designed this jewel. I mean, it was completely, you were on a tenement seeming street that was dirty and gray, and you opened this patina door. It had that kind of greenish tinge on it, and you were in like a jewel box. It was wood. It was a mixture of all kinds of architectural elements, and had a huge grand piano that Dudley Moore would play when he was there. Liza Minnelli sang when she would come in.
I remember that.
you know, it was just, and it was because Tony had an office across the street where Robert Redford and all kinds of people had offices at various stages. So it was a little bit like when Daniel was talking about the negative ions, bringing Hollywood down there, put them on a different level. But I literally got to, you know, see on a regular basis Cary Grant and Elizabeth Taylor, and just extraordinary connections were made as well. You know, in terms of my friends, we were all very Venice-centric. We were very proud of Venice, and loved being on that edge of both, you know, kind of outlaw, but obviously being gentrified, but nowhere near the way that we see in the last, you know, 10 years.
But I would walk there every night with Bartok, you know, to pick him up. And at the end of the shift, and then we drive back in his Volkswagen, and yeah, like one night I remember getting there, and they said, oh, close the doors, and Michael Feinstein was on the piano, and Liza hopped on the piano and started singing to the restaurant, and it was like, okay, this is pretty cool, you know.
The funny thing about opening James Beach was how quickly the deal came together. Now when I look at restaurants and, you know, putting together $2 million to just open a place, we were a very kind of simple, and I think because we had lived next door and been in Venice the entire, you know, 15 years at that point, we just had a kind of confidence that if it was going to work, it was going to work, and if it didn't, we'd both find other things to do. So there was a kind of carefreeness that I think really appealed to people, especially ones who had watched the West Beach kind of, you know, start. Bruce kind of lost interest, went on to other projects, and
oh, he introduced us to Sherry, though.
Right, to our chef for 10 years.
Yeah.
And
who was a lesbian, by the way. So the two gay guys and a lesbian were, and you know, which was unheard of, kind of. That's another thing to appreciate, which is that people really hadn't connected with gay people like, you know, like they do today. There were a lot of people we knew who didn't know any gay people, you know, or didn't know they knew gay people, and, you know, would say to us, because again, we were the stable couple, we were meeting people all the time, and we were like the goodwill group for gays. You know, I mean, there were people who said, you know, I never knew a gay person, I always thought they were perverts, and you know, but you have changed my mind about how gay people are, you know.
We were blessed twice. One was within months we were reviewed in the LA Times with an outstanding review, and then Gourmet magazine came in, and which was pretty unheard of at, you know, 6 months open. That put us on the map in a way that we never looked back. We were really fortunate to find a year and a half into it that the place across the street, which is an iconic, very upscale Mexican restaurant called Rebecca's, which Bruce from the West Beach owned and named after his wife. He wanted to sell that all of a sudden. And so we were able to get that place and made that a whole adventure in terms of, you know, put in a sushi bar, and it was called the Canal Club. And that had a nice 20-year run there as well. I literally feel like I blinked and the whole place came to life, and our lives were full of meeting Venetians, meeting people who were attracted to Venice, being, you know, we joked at James Beach all the time that real estate agents would come there to close the deal. They would show him the house, and then they'd say, now you've got to see this place that's so full of life and love. And all the time they would say, yep, that did it. Like they knew they wanted that to be their neighborhood place. Our third restaurant was actually named after Daniel and was a tribute to Venice. I always thought of it as the Museum of Venice History.
Well, it's funny,
Let's talk about the origins of that and get into Daniel.
God, how did that start? Well, so it was St. Mark's originally, and it became you know, a bunch of things.
Where is that?
It's on Windward. It's on the corner of Windward and Speedway.
It's a very historic building.
Very historic was the Windward Hotel. There was a big feud with the people who were operating it. There was a guy, I forget his name, but he had a place called Tantra, and he would walk around with a sword, in a big caftan with a sword. And he kept it open after hours, and he sold Jello shots to minors because he said it was a food. The Sharps who owned the property of James Beach and Canal Club were like, point out their hair. The city took away part of the liquor license because they didn't want to operate so late. And so they got us involved. They said, hey, maybe you guys could fix this. And we went in there, and essentially, we decided to take over that restaurant. We got the liquor license reinstated because we had good reputations. But because it was such a historic location, and we had the last remaining gondola that Abercrombie brought from the Lewis and Clark exhibition in Oregon in 1906. There were 12 of them. 11 of them burnt down. We had the last remaining one, and we wanted to create a house for it. So, in this old building, we created piers to hold this 1-ton gondola over the bar. And for a long time, one of the things to bring back the history, I was very much trying to support people connecting to the history of Venice, to connecting because of its art roots. There's so much that's happened in Venice, from beat poetry to, the Doors, and God knows, and so many people didn't have any idea, it was just kind of getting lost. And so we were trying to preserve that. And one of the things, there was a group who wanted to put up the Venice sign. And they had been raising some money for a while, but it was kind of stuck in limbo. Todd von Hoffman was involved with that, and I got involved because the city wouldn't give a permit to put up the sign unless the Coastal Commission gave them the okay, and the Coastal Commission wouldn't give them an okay unless the city gave them a permit. So it was stuck for years in no man's land, and we had just gone through this whole rigmarole of like building piers in a historic building. So we were really good friends with Bill Rosendahl, who was the first openly gay city councilman, and Mark Grant. And so we had a lot of pull at that time. And we came up with the idea of putting the Venice sign up as a Christmas light decoration, putting it on a Christmas permit. So essentially, we went to Coastal Commission and said, we have a permit. It's a Christmas decoration permit for the Venice sign. We raised the money and said, this is going to be great for Venice. It's going to be like the Hollywood sign. It's going to be a moniker. People will photograph it. But anyway, so we had a party up at Danny's for all the Venice historians and people who were part of this effort. And Danny's was so new, we didn't even have enough glasses. So at James Beach, we had glassware in the basement of the old clubhouse. This clubhouse was built in 1911. It was an old California bungalow, and it had a kind of funny basement. And anyways, the gondola was hanging over the bar, as I said, but the bow of the gondola, the coxcomb, used to hang down too far. It would hit people in the head. So during some prior period, it had been removed from the gondola and had been lost, if you will. And so it was like the holy grail of Venice. And so anyways, I run to James Beach, and I'm down in the basement, and I notice a piece of wood wedged between the base of this fireplace, this ancient fireplace, and the mud walls, pretty much. And I reach in and I pull out, and it's the fucking bow of the gondola that's been lost for who knows how many years. That day, I just happened in a basement I've been to hundreds of times. That time I noticed it. So I pulled out, I'm like in shock. It's like a Torah, it's this big, and I put it over my shoulder, and I go back to Danny's, and I go, it gives me goosebumps right now. And I go, nobody's going to believe this. But, this Holy Grail, this thing that Abercrombie, the last one that was, lost forever, of the one remaining gondola, we just found it, just now. Right before we light up the Venice sign for the first time. I mean, if that's not a sign that Abercrombie approves of what we're doing, getting people to connect to that sense of community, to connect to freedom. You know, Venice really should be about freedom. It shouldn't be about money. It shouldn't be, you know, and things do change. I mean, people, the style of art's changed. They're more digital now, let's say, but you know, but still that sense of creativity and freedom, I think, is what attracts the Googles and the Snaps and all these people down here. They want to connect to that creative energy, that sense of freedom. And, you know, it's, in the Zen sense, it's one of those things you can't hold on to. You almost have to let go to feel it. You know, it's that, to feel freedom.
Okay. I think that's a good spot, but if there's anything more that you guys want to share that we haven't touched on, or any last thoughts that you want to put on?
I don't know. We could go on for weeks.